Hello, and welcome back to the TCF Introduction video series. In this episode, we'll delve into the third step of the TCF procedure of getting user consent and explore a more complex scenario involving a publisher obtaining and storing user consent on behalf of an ad tech vendor. As a quick recap, the TCF is an industry-wide initiative developed by IAB Europe to standardize user consent procedures under privacy regulations like the GDPR. The TCF builds up a standard with 3 steps. We now focus on the third step. We've designed 3 cases under different scenarios to provide a comprehensive overview of the TCF procedure. We discussed case simple in the previous episode, which is a straightforward example to help understand how a TC string works. Case medium, which we'll discuss now, is a general case describing how a publisher obtains and stores consent on behalf of its partner vendor. Finally, case complicated explains how actors affect each other when having different consent statuses. For example, a vendor may lose access to a user's data if its partner vendor does not have the user's consent. Let's dive into case medium, where a publisher asks for and stores consent on behalf of a vendor. A publisher, Publisher A, decides to offer ad slots on its website to monetize its content with ad revenue. Therefore, Publisher A chooses an ad tech vendor, Vendor S, from the global vendor list as its partner and notifies CMPA about this change. In this example, Vendor S is a demand-side platform, DSP, where a publisher lists its advertising inventory for advertisers to buy. When user X visits Publisher A, the CMP tag code runs and checks whether a TC string with complete consent information exists. Since Vendor S was only recently added, explicit consent for Vendor S to process user X's data is missing. Thus, CMPA shows a new cookie banner to user X. User X sees Vendor S and its purposes on the cookie banner and chooses a yes for basic ad selection and a no for personalized ad selection. In step 6, CMPA encodes the consent information into a new TC string for user X, Publisher A. Then, Publisher A saves the new TC string in the local storage of user X. In step 8, Publisher A signals Vendor S an ad call via a vendor tag. Before processing user X's data, Vendor S reads the TC string via the CMP API and recognizes it can only use user X's data to select basic ads. Then, Vendor S serves basic ads to Publisher A for user X in step 13. On the next day, user X visits Publisher A once more. In this scenario, if user X has not deleted the TC string in the local storage, Publisher A and Vendor S can rely on the previously saved permissions as given. In other words, no cookie banner pops up, saving steps 4 to 7. Now let's move on to the complicated case where Publisher A starts selling the ad slots through another ad tech vendor, Vendor P, which is an ad exchange. Vendor S can only buy ad slots via Vendor P. When user X visits Publisher A, steps 1 to 3 occur again. CMPA checks the local storage of user X and finds out that consent for Vendor P is missing. Therefore, CMPA shows a new cookie banner to user X with purposes for Vendor S and Vendor P. Assume that user X ticks yes for basic ad selection for Vendor S only, and no for the remaining purposes. CMPA encodes the consent information into a new TC string. Publisher A, Vendor S, and Vendor P can all decode it and interpret the string. When the vendor tag on the website runs in step 8, Publisher A sends an ad call to Vendor P. However, Vendor P cannot use user X's data for either of the purposes. As a result, Vendor S has no access to the data, even though it has user consent for basic ad selection. The dashed gray arrows show the loss of access to user data. This situation implies that Vendor S can no longer show a basic ad that it could have been able to show for user X because its partner doesn't have user consent. While we've covered several scenarios in this video series, the reality is that the interplay between publishers and vendors can be even more sophisticated. The TCF helps to mitigate this complexity by providing clear procedures to obtain and store user consent. You may wonder just how large this complicated network can get and how long it would take a user to make all possible daily decisions. Our book answers these questions and details the TCF and other privacy regulations affecting the online advertising industry. So, be sure to check it out.